Looks like several people will be joining late, which is completely fine. I'm very happy to have you guys here today. We are partnered with ACS Laboratory, and we are with Greenpoint Research. My name is Robin Pate, and I'm joined here today with Joseph Jeffries. And we are excited to talk to you about how to read a COA today. A COA is a certificate of analysis, and you'll hear more about the details in just a little bit. In terms of some of the questions you guys might have, the actual presentation will not be online later. However, a video of the webinar will be. So we will be communicating via email. Post-event, we will ask you guys to complete a survey. Please complete it. It's very helpful for us, especially as we're looking at future content and programming. Also, we will have a link to the online webinar, so you guys can click and watch and learn over time. Sometimes people like to look at a topic more than one time just so they can retain it or share it with friends or colleagues. And also from a format perspective, today's presentation will have a presentation from Joseph, but then also Q&A at the end. In terms of Q&A, if you want to ask a question, you can add it quickly into the chat box. You can send it to me directly, or you can send it to the entire group. One thing we've learned from some of our past presentations is that a lot of times people have the same question. So if you can add it into the group chat, that's always helpful, just because then we can aggregate some of the questions. And sometimes the questions feed onto other topics we might want to cover. Last week we had a webinar and we had probably 20 to 25 questions at the end. So it was a great discussion, a lot of great feedback and content in there. So again, we'll be following up with that. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, I'm monitoring the chat. I want to say thank you to the ACS team. Also, some of the folks from the Greenpoint side that were helpful in terms of getting this going. Masha and Mariana, just want to say thank you guys for all the help. Marketing this webinar wouldn't be successful and have so many people attending if it weren't for you guys, so thank you. Also, Light Townsend, our Chief Legal Officer, has provided a lot of input on this webinar. He is heavily involved in compliance and always has good input, so thank you so much, Light. And also want to thank Joseph for volunteering to be our speaker today. So with no further questions, I will hand it over to Joseph.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. I'm going to share my screen here for you guys. Just a second. Awesome. So like Robin said, my name is Joseph Jeffries. I work with ACS Laboratory. And today I'm going to be going over with you guys how to read a COA. So a little bit on today's agenda, we'll start with some background information on who ACS Laboratory is and what kind of sets us apart. We'll then cover some of the common hemp and cannabis labeling issues that we're seeing today and go into some of the state of the industry type stuff. We'll then start going into what a COA actually is and what makes it up. We then will break it down section by section, go through the entire thing, make sure we can understand and read the whole thing. And then we'll go over some of the red flags, some things to look out for, some ways to spot a fake. And lastly, we'll end up with some audience Q&A. So who is ACS Laboratory? ACS Laboratory is the largest hemp and cannabis testing laboratory in the East Coast. We were founded in 2008 as a clinical laboratory and still maintain those clinical certifications today. But about 4 years ago, we made the switch over into cannabis and hemp testing. We use all in-house developed methodologies, which has led us to be able to exceed national and state hemp requirements. Those methodologies actually won us 21 Emerald Awards for our accuracy and consistency in testing. And through that, we've also become Forge's largest designated in-state hemp testing laboratory. We're also very involved in the hemp Florida scene. Greenpoint is as well. That's kind of how we became introduced to each other. We were both part of the Hemp Industry Association of Florida, and with the diligence that they wanted to take in the testing and the level of research that they wanted to do, it was a natural connection to start partnering up. So we're also leaders in compliance and innovation. We're the largest DEA licensed laboratory designated by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to perform hemp testing all across the state of Florida. We exceed the USDA requirements through those in-house developed methodologies, and through that we have customers in 44 states that use us to go above their state's compliance standards. We're also a certified marijuana testing laboratory by the Florida Department of Health, so we're pretty involved in the medical marijuana scene down here as well. And we're one of the first laboratories to start testing for CBT, which is a new upcoming cannabinoid that there's starting to be more and more research on. We also developed our own polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon test, which is a known carcinogen created through extraction processes, heating, things like that. So we're constantly looking at new ways to build on our testing practices, build new testing options, and really help our clients stay above that compliance that they want to stay in front of. So some common labeling issues and things that we're seeing in the state of the industry today are largely due to the infantile state of the industry. As we're seeing more regulations come out, we're starting to see more standardization in it, but there's still some problems. There was a study by the Journal of American Medical Association that tested a handful, quite a few CBD products. Of all those products they tested, they found 70% were actually misrepresenting the cannabinoid content on those products. So if it was 1,000 milligram tincture, it could have 2,000 in there, it could have 500, it could have 20, it could have none. It was really all over the place there. They also found that of those products, about 20% of them contained THC that wasn't mentioned. So really through proper testing and proper certificate of analysis and things, we can actually accurately attribute products to what their ingredients are, make accurate label claims there, and kind of help consumers really know, have the confidence and transparency to know the product they're going with is safe and that it's properly tested and that it's true to the label claim. But a large part of that is due to the lack of education in the industry. As we kind of saw with the poll today, a lot of people don't know very much about certificates of analysis. They're not sure why they're important, what makes them up, or really, you know, the whole what's the big deal with them. So we're going to go over some of that today, hopefully give you guys a better idea of everything there and help you kind of understand why the standardization of this industry is an important factor. So what is a certificate of analysis? A COA is, like I said, a certificate of analysis, and it's an analytical report of all the testing contracted for any product in question. COA that we're going to be using here today is actually a real Greenpoint Research COA. It's also tested diligently to the full panel. You see that all of the tests that was performed on it have been passed, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that as well, but it's a prime example of what you really should be looking for in a COA. So it'll cover all the different safety and potency verifications, everything that was tested. It'll really give an outline as well as intricate details on all of the tests that were performed. It's your way to prove that your product is compliant, that it's below that 0.3% THC, that it's true to the label claim, that, you know, that what you're saying the product is what the product truly is. And it also is a great way to provide your consumers and customers with that confidence and transparency to know that your product is true to what you're saying it is. So we'll start to break it down section by section here. The first section is going to be the header, and it's going to be very important for really making sure that the COA you have is for the product that you have as well. The first thing you'll want to do is check out the report date right up here. What that's going to tell you is make sure that it was relevant to the product, make sure the product's, you know, recent, that it wasn't produced 5 years ago and had just been sitting on a shelf till you found it, and really help you know that it's still viable. Next, you have the name of the laboratory right up here. This is a good way for consumers to then check out that laboratory, look the credentials up, make sure that it's a legitimate operation and that it's someone you trust that COA to come from, rather than just a couple guys who have a GCMS machine in their garage and are just putting results out. Next thing on here is the company name. This should always generally match the company name of the product, unless it's maybe white labeled or, you know, they're working with a different supplier or something there. It may be different, but this should usually match up. Also gives you information on where the company's out of and kind of some brand info there. Next, we have the batch number. This is very crucial to the product. This will be your way of knowing that not just the product in hand, but the actual batch created of that product that you're consuming is the same as the results that you're testing for. Every batch is supposed to be tested, so you should be able to pull that batch number right up and guarantee that it's the same as that certificate of analysis that you're looking at. Product description here is step 5. That just guarantees that you have the right product in hand. You know, it could be from the same batch of material, but you might be looking at the 1,200 milligram tincture COA while you're holding the 1,500 milligrams. So it could be completely different data behind that batch number. And then lastly, the QR code. This is your end all be all of validating the COA, making sure that it's legitimate, unadulterated. The COA or the QR codes on our COAs will always link to a PDF version of that certificate of analysis downloaded from our servers. So this is the client or customer's way of knowing that the COA is coming from the lab, that the lab is the one that put these results out, and that they haven't been filtered or adulterated by any outside parties. Next, we have a summary of the results. This is going to give you a quick breakdown of everything that the sample was tested for. So we can see on this Greenpoint Research here, they did the full panel of tests. This product's compliant. It was tested for potency, which you'll notice is the only one that's not passed, just because there's not a pass or fail designation for potency. Then we can see it was passed for heavy metals, mycotoxins, pathogenic microbiology, residual solvents, Listeria monocytogenes, and pesticides. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on what each of those means in a little bit here. But then you also get a breakdown of your potency results here. You can see on here real quick, just on a quick glance of the COA, that this product's got 89.8% COA, or CBD, I'm sorry. There's no THC, no CBD, little bit of CBN and some other cannabinoids there for a total cannabinoid concentration of 90.73%. So then if we go a step farther, we get to start to break down those potency results a little bit. This is the big part for actually understanding the data behind it and where a lot of people start to get lost. So we'll take our time with this one here. Potency, like I said, and terpenes will always be your tested rather than pass fail. But this is your way of seeing, you know, if the potency results show that there's 100 milligrams in there and it's 100 milligrams supposed to be in the product, you know, you're good. But then if it pulls up that it's 25, you can see maybe this product's not quite what they're saying it is. But so to understand the potency results, we have 3 different columns for each of them here. The first column is always going to be the result in milligrams per gram. Anytime the compound was detected, we'll then give you that result there. Next to that, you have your percentage that identifies that same result in a concentration form of the total composition of that product. So we can see on this product, for example, it was 0.54% CBDV, 0.39% CBN, and 89.8% CBD. We then also have our LOQ in this third column here. What the LOQ is your limit of quantification. What that means is it's the lowest possible concentration of that cannabinoid in the product that our laboratory could accurately detect. So for all of our cannabinoids, we can see that we can accurately quantify all the way down to a 0.001% concentration. For the cannabinoids that we tested lower than that, you then see their percent represented as less than LOQ. What this means is that there could potentially still be CBC or THCA in there, but what we can accurately tell you is that it is quantifiably less than a 0.001% amount or an extremely trace value there. You'll also see then anything less than LOQ also has a blank in the milligrams per gram, just to show that if there is any milligrams per gram, it's less than we're able to quantify. Same thing for the terpenes here. You get each individual analyte, you get the result for it, the percentage there, and then the LOQ on those as well. The next portion is going to be your contaminant results. This is a big portion for really for being compliant and making sure that your product is tested safe and free of all the different things that more and more states are starting to put out compliance standards for. So for our laboratory, we typically test everything to the action levels established by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Sciences. Nice part for our customers is these are the strictest standards in the nation. So as you're looking to market your product nationally or go into different states, you'll know you're going to be meeting those states' compliance standards and not have to worry about any run-ins with any state agencies or anything like that. But you can see that we test heavy metals, mycotoxins, pathogenic microbiology, pesticides, and residual solvents, all 2 levels established by that by the FDACs there. You'll also notice that the heavy metals, residual solvents, pesticides, and mycotoxins all have an established action level in this first category, where the pathogenic microbiology results here are just presence and absence. The reason for that is the action level that the state established is the highest quantity that's safe for consumption. So anything, for example, if we're looking at heavy metals, arsenic here, you can have 1,500 parts per billion of arsenic and still be considered safe. This product is less than LOQ, so we know it has less than our 100 lower limit of quantification, less than 100 parts per billion there. But if this product, if it came back at $14.99, it would still be safe. You'd still have the pass designation right here. However, if it came back at 1,501 parts per million, you'd then have a fail there. Product would be marked not safe for consumption, and any consumer will be able to see that just through COA there. So similar setup to understanding these results as the potency results. This first level or this first column will always be your action level that's established by the state or whatever agency we're testing to the standards of. Your second result here will always be the LOQ, or I'm sorry, always be the result of the test. And then your third column here is our actual LOQ, or the lowest amount in parts per billion that we could detect of that compound. So everything here, we can see some of the LOQs vary on these pesticides, but we can see that each one we tested, there was no result above that LOQ for, no quantifiable data. which is a good thing to see as a consumer, because you then know that not only is the product safe and below those action levels, but there wasn't any amount of them detected in there. It's, as far as the LOQ goes, free of them, at least to that level. The last portion of the COA is going to be reading the footer, and this is going to be big for legitimizing the COA. This is your way of showing that the laboratory stands behind the results, that they're signed off on, that, you know, the laboratory puts their information out for any questions or anything about the COA, and that they're willing to stand behind those results. So our COAs will always include our signatures of both our lab toxicologist and our principal scientist here, just showing that they sign off on the data and stand by it. It also includes our laboratory's contact info. We have a phone and fax number, an email, a website, as well as our license number and our CLIA number. These are also a great way to check the laboratory's credentials on it. If you have a COA and there's none of this information at the bottom, it's not signed off by anybody, there's no license number, there's no other certification numbers, you should definitely take that as a red flag, where, you know, a COA with all this information present, with all the information there, should be a sign of confidence for you. So now that we know what makes up the COA and what kind of goes into it, we'll talk about some of the red flags and things to look out for to kind of take those COAs with a grain of salt. The first one is going to be a lack of contaminant testing, especially as a consumer. If you're looking at products, looking at tinctures, gummies, whatever they are, and you pull up a COA and it's just a potency COA, it should be a bit of a red flag. You know, maybe the company's just not very big yet and isn't going for those full panel tests yet, but to be able to pull that up next to a COA that shows that this company can confidently say that their product's free of heavy metals, of contaminants, of pesticides, of mycotoxins, microbials, all these different things, is definitely a vote of confidence as a consumer. Another thing would be failed contaminant testing. If you pull up the COA on your product and you see that it was failed for whatever contaminant was there, that should definitely be a red flag to you. You should know that whatever it is, this product in some form isn't safe for consumption. It failed in some category there, and you should probably not be consuming that product. Missing common cannabinoids is another. As I talked about with that American Medical Association study, there's unreported THC in products, there's unreported other cannabinoids there. So if you pull up a COA and you see it's only got the CBD result and nothing else, that should be a bit of a red flag for you. If you see, you know, it's only got a couple cannabinoids, 2 or 3, or there's big ones that are missing, that should kind of raise some red flags as well. Whereas if you see, you know, a full 11 cannabinoid profile, a full 17 cannabinoid profile, that should give you confidence in knowing that those potencies were more than likely accurately tested and being displayed properly. Laboratory certifications is another huge one, especially as farmers or retailers or people in the industry side of it. You want to verify any laboratory you're using. If you go to work with a laboratory and they're not ISO accredited, they're not DEA registered, they're not in any other sort of like hemp industry association or any sort of associations there, or any other credentials to stand for, that should be a huge red flag. Any laboratory is going to want to show off the credentials they have. They're going to want to brag about the certifications they hold, and they'll be more than willing to show them. So anytime you come across one that doesn't have those, should definitely raise some concerns there. Non-compliant THC levels is also going to be a big one here, especially as we're taking off on the farming in Florida. Any COA that's especially for hemp will have to have those THC levels on it. So if you're going to work with somebody who's been growing or has their product to work with, it's good to make sure that that THC percent is still below the 0.3 and that it's a legal, viable product to be working with. CBD 10% variance from claimed is also a red flag. The FDA guidance is generally to be within 10% of your label claim on there. So if you have 1,000 milligram tincture, if you pull that COA up, it should always be somewhere between 900 and 1,100 milligrams. If you pull it up and it's 850 or 1,250 or anywhere there, that should raise a red flag that, you know, maybe this company doesn't have their production processes quite honed in on. Maybe they're not quite homogenizing properly. There could be worth looking into it, something going on there. And then same thing with terpene content. If there's a product that's claiming a certain terpene or claiming a certain benefit from a terpene, it's important to be able to pull that COA up, look at the concentration of that terpene and verify that it's actually there, that it's in a quantity that's going to, work for the benefits that they're claiming, and that it's true to what they're saying it is. So hopefully this helps you guys be able to, 1, understand the COA when you get it, 2, legitimize it, make sure it's proper, and really have that confidence and transparency, knowing that the product you're getting is the product that you think you're getting. But at this time, I'd love to open it up to some questions and hear what you guys have to ask.
Thanks, Joseph.
No problem, Robin.
Great overview. So we already have 3 questions that have come in. The first one was regarding the actual COA. Can distributors change the company name on the COA to match the company whenever they white label? And if so, are there any regulations surrounding that methodology?
Yes, so that will kind of depend on the lab you're working with. If you're working with ACS Laboratory, that's absolutely a possibility. What we can do is any COA that's generated, we then have the ability, as long as the batch number and the product description still is corresponding, we can issue that in as many different names as we need. So if you have 10 clients that you're making a product for, you can reissue that COA into all of their names so they can each have their own individual COA for that.
Okay, excellent. All right, next question. Do all COAs have terpenes listed?
No, all COAs will not have terpenes listed. And this is terpenes are kind of a huge area right now to help with the marketability through a COA. They're not something that's required, and they're not something that every company is testing for. So to test those terpenes is a great way to help distinguish your product, to help, with your marketability on it, to be able to know what's in there, and is a great tool for the marketing side of things.
Okay, awesome. All right, next question. If there's a failed contaminant test result on the report, does the product not get sold? And is this a standard requirement?
Ideally, the product does not get sold. However, not everyone in this industry is the best of players. So there occasionally are times where people will have a failed contaminant and still try to put that product out and hope that they can just slip by in the cracks, which is why it's important to check those COAs to make sure that it is failed, and make sure that it is passed and not failed, and get that confidence there. At the same time, though, from a business standpoint, if you were to test something and it comes back failed, you do have the option to remediate to where you can have it not be failed for it. So for example, if you make a crude oil and you see that your residual solvents, you haven't expunged them properly and they're still through the roof, you could then still keep processing it all the way down to an isolate, then test it again, see that they were expunged out, and then have a product that's not failed for that contaminant.
Okay, excellent. All right, next question. If the farm does a full panel of tests, what does the processor need to test for?
So the processor, if the farmer does a full panel of tests, for one, the processor, that's a great vote of confidence to be able to work with them. Though processors generally want to see that the product was tested for everything, to know that they're not going to put microbials into their machines, they're not going to put heavy metals, they're not going to contaminate their own equipment. So if the processor sees the full panel, they know it's a safe hemp or biomass product to use. But then once they actually do the processing, that's when they would do their full panel to, one, double check their potency, to two, make sure they expunge the solvents, and just verify all the concentrations of those other contaminants as well.
Okay, excellent. All right, next question. How long does it take for a COA to be created?
So at ACS Laboratory, our turnaround time is always 2 to 5 days. So once the samples get into the lab, they start testing then, and then in 2 to 5 days, you have those results back.
Okay. And what is the cost for a full round of testing to obtain a COA for one strain?
It depends on, if you're looking for the full panel test, it'll really, it's going to be a few $100s generally. Different laboratories will offer different things depending on how many analytes they're testing to, how in-depth their tests are, but you're generally looking at about a few $100 for a full panel.
Okay. You know your CBD level of milligrams and grams from the COA. How do you determine how many milligrams of CBD are in 1 milliliter of the product?
So that actually is one of the options with ACS Laboratory that you have as the business submitting for the certificate of analysis, is you actually get to select how you want your potency reported. So this one, for example, was just a crude distillate, which is why it was still in milligrams per gram, but you can select milligrams per milliliter, you can select milligrams per unit, so they can see in your 30 milliliter tincture exactly how many milligrams are in the entire thing. Have it so you can have both per milligram or per milliliter dosage as well as per unit, and you really get quite a bit of flexibility to be able to present that data however you would like to your clients.
Okay. Next question. What if the processor is from the same company spouse, is what the question says. So I'm not sure if I read that correctly, but I guess this is multiple submissions for the same product. From
Gotcha.
people.
Yeah. So what a lot of people will do, like if you're vertically integrated, so where you're, growing it, processing it, retailing it, all those kind of things, is they'll kind of just set up their own tests along their production line. So they'll know, when they get biomass in, they want to run it for pesticides, microbials, potency, and probably the full panel just to make sure it's safe. And then once they do their extraction process on that, rather than sending it for an entire full panel again, they might just do a potency and a residual solvents to see how things are, and then do their expunging process, maybe just send in for one more residual solvents, and then work up to, at the end, you'll have to get that full panel on the final product, but then that way you can save yourself some of those tests along the way and prevent redundancy.
Okay, excellent. And just clarifying the information from Lori, she just said we're a small farm, husband is the processor, wife is the grower.
Gotcha. Yeah, exactly. So you guys, you could test the flour initially to make sure that it's safe, that you have good starting material going in. Then you could just do the potency on the process, verify the things that you weren't sure of. And then once it gets to that final retail stage, that's where you could then send it for another panel rather than having to send for panels the entire steps along the way.
Okay. If you need the COA change for the distribution company name, what are the costs associated?
With ACS Laboratory, it's just a $50 name change per COA, not per test. So a full panel COA, potency COA, whatever it is, $50 gets it right into whatever name you need.
Okay, awesome. Okay, next question. Do you provide advisory services on what is needed to lower or raise percentages on CBD, CBG, etc.? And I think I don't know if this is specifically a testing question or a farming question or a little bit of both.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, as far as farming, it's a little bit harder. I haven't farmed myself, so I don't have a ton of the things, and we can help in some sort, but especially in formulations and things, we can definitely help out there. I've had clients come to me that, they are working with a supplier and they're expecting a CBD result at 15% and it comes back at 0.15%. They're thinking, oh no, what do I do? And absolutely, I've helped people with the formulations, helped them get it up, helped them get it down, and we're absolutely willing to help with that.
Okay, excellent. And just a plug for Greenpoint, one of the things we do at Greenpoint Research is farming consulting. So if you have specific questions about farming, we probably have people on staff that can help with that.
Perfect.
Okay, next question. When we read numerous tests, all of the cannabinoids don't add up to 100%. For example, CBD 70%, CBD 3%, CBG 2%, et cetera, et cetera. This is 80% plus the less of 0.03%. How do you explain the other matter to get up to 100%?
Yeah, so unless you're working with an extremely pure isolate, your material will never be 100% cannabinoids. There's always going to be plant matter in there. There's going to be lipids. There's going to be, different plant parts that make it through the extraction process that don't get all the way filtered out, just different plant material and things and compounds in there that don't make it all the way out. So if you process all the way down to an isolate, you can get it to where it's 99.9% pure and have it to where it's pretty much all cannabinoids there. But that percentage is represented as the percentage of the entire material rather than just of the cannabinoid percentage.
Okay. Perfect. All right, next question. I think you'll like this one. What are the benefits to creating a long-term partnership with ACS?
Absolutely. So the benefits of creating a long-term partnership with ACS is, one, the reproducibility and accuracy of our tests. With a lot of labs, with really any labs, if you send the same sample to 3 different labs, you're going to get 3 different results based on sample prep, based on methodology, based on various factors there. But once you can get a laboratory that is consistent and that is testing to those diligent levels, you can kind of then use that on your own processes. So we've had clients who, they've sent it to other labs and kind of range on these percentages, but then with a more accurate laboratory like ACS Laboratory, they can send it and really hone in on that process. So instead of having to put 105% of the CBD they want to be able to get that laboratory to test the 100% that they're looking for, they can then just fill with that 100%. They can cut down on the excess that they're filling and really maximize the efficiency of their processes.
Okay. Next question. Can we ship you crude above the 0.03 THC level?
Because ACS Laboratory is a registered DEA laboratory, we can work with that as long as it's hemp product. As long as we're being sent hemp product and it's interpreted as hemp for part of the, the remediation process or the refining process to get that down to where it's viable as a hemp product, that's absolutely okay. But, if somebody sends us a 85% THC oil that was hemp, that one's going to raise some red flags.
Sure. Understood. Okay. Do you all have any additional questions? Okay, next question. ACS is CLIA certified. Does that mean also GPL or good manufacturing practice compliant also?
There's definitely a lot of overlaps with those standards. I believe we meet all of them. I just don't know if we have the actual certification for it. But with those CLIA standards, they're very extensive as well. They're clinical standards for all clinical laboratories across the nation there. So we maintain those certifications. We are actively doing the checks and checkups to maintain those certifications and doing everything required.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and a question from me. So what are the biggest trends and changes you've seen over the last 6 to 12 months in terms of testing?
Yeah, I think we're definitely, well, for one, we're starting to see a lot more compliance. There's more states now like Florida and Texas, Massachusetts, Louisiana, California, Oregon. All these states are now starting to have their own compliance standards. So we're starting to see a lot more companies move towards those full panels and away from just the potency tests to make sure their product is safe as well. At the same time, we're also seeing a lot more educated consumers, I think. We're starting to, instead of just having people do an 11 cannabinoid potency profile, we're starting to see people go for the 17 option to get some of those more minor details in there. We're starting to see people add all those terpene analysis in to be able to market that side of their product as well. And then other niche tests too. We're starting to see people go for things like flavonoids, like micronutrients, things that can help kind of make their product a little bit more unique and can appeal to a more educated consumer.
Okay, excellent. Next question, this is ACS centric. Can you please share why ACS is at least the highest quality lab in this space?
Absolutely. So like I kind of talked about before, one thing that really sets ACS Laboratory apart is our in-house developed methodologies. A lot of laboratories, especially when they're starting, will just kind of buy some standards from online. And a lot of times that works great, but they don't really transition from product type to product type. So if you're looking at a topical with the same method that you're looking at a water with the same method as flour and all these different things, you're going to get very inconsistent results. Where we have SOPs in place for just beverages, for just tinctures, for just crudes, for gummies, for all these different product lines, and they're all methods that we've in-house developed and then had validated through our ISO accreditation. So we're able to really accurately test many different types of products. We're able to, be reproducible on those results and really just help our clients hone in on their processes and know that they're accurately producing their product.
Okay, excellent. How many tests are in the full panel? And again, approximate cost for the full panel?
So it'll really depend on the product type, but if you're, if it's flour or a tincture with terpenes or different things there, you're going to range from about $350 to about $450 there. And then at a minimum level, it's going to include your potency, your pesticides, your mycotoxins, microbiology, residual solvents, heavy metals, and moisture, depending on if it's flour or not.
Okay. Excellent. All right, and for anyone who might have joined late, just want to reiterate, we will be sending out a link to a survey and then also a link to this recording. It's about an hour long, so we'll need to edit just a little bit just to make sure some of the beginning parts were out. So that might take a couple of days. So just stay tuned. We will send out a link. We won't be sending out the specific presentation like in a PDF or PowerPoint form just because of some IP, but we will be able to send out a link. That way you'll have the discussion as well. Are there any further questions? I see one more in the chat box. We offer testing services for international customers.
Absolutely. We've worked with clients in quite a few different countries now, in Japan, in the Europe and UK, all across the world now. We've had people South America too, Caribbean. We're seeing a lot of different international clients come to us, and it's awesome to work with them. We'll work with everybody.
In terms of international, are you seeing any trends in terms of countries you're working with more or less over the last few months?
Definitely starting to see a lot more concentration of like Brazil and the UK and Japan, I think are probably the big three right now. I think too, part of that, why we're seeing so many people come over to that is with that level of diligence that we test to, we go a lot lower in our limits of quantification than other laboratories are going. So we can test a lot more stringently on some of those analytes. So Japan, for example, I believe they have to be below 100 parts per billion for THC or 100 parts per million THC. So a lot of laboratories can't accurately test that low, where then they can come to us. We're testing down to 15 parts per million, and they can get all those results to keep them compliant with their governments as well.
Okay, excellent. Okay, a couple more questions coming in with regards to the international topic. Question 1, how would foreign clients send their samples to ACS?
So we generally just whatever shipping method is easiest for the client to use works for us. As long as they can just get the samples in, we can get them right into testing. We do ask our international clients to prepay for it. That way, as soon as the samples get in, we can just get them right into testing, not have to worry about any delay there, and haven't really seen any problems with it. What I recommend too is if you have any sort of hemp license or any sort of past COA that shows the product is free of THC or below those legal limits, to just include that in there in case it does get opened or anything. It's just kind of nice to have that extra confidence.
Okay, excellent. So we did have a question that came in regarding shipping recommendations. It sounded like you didn't necessarily have any specific shipping recommendations.
We recommend vacuum sealed, especially for flower products. We always recommend vacuum sealing or putting in a sealed plastic container. It helps to kind of prevent some incubation that could take place in transit. But for the most part, shipping is pretty easy into us. Really, whatever the preferred method is of the client tends to work.
Okay, excellent. All right, next question. Can you set up a lab overseas?
We are in the process of expanding and looking at other locations. I'm not sure where we're at right now with overseas, but at this time we just have the one central location in Florida.
Okay, excellent. Okay, there were a couple of people that either send a note in the chat or in the question area mentioning that they couldn't join, but they were looking forward to the link. So we had quite a few that attended in person and some that will be watching the link. As a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Joseph. He left his email on the last page of the PowerPoint, but we can also put it in the chat and we can also include it in the email that goes out. If you have any questions for Greenpoint, we are happy to answer those as well. You can send those to Greenpoint at info@greenpointresearch.com, or you can send them to myself at robin.pate@greenpointresearch. Next question, one more question. Have you considered partnering with labs overseas?
We have had we've been approached with that a little bit. We just, at this time, we don't have enough overseas market really and international clients. We're seeing some, but we don't really have enough in any central location to be able to have a move that would make sense or, have an ideal partnership at this time. But that's definitely something we're open to.
Okay. Next question. Do you see the United States Postal Service as a potential customer for your testing services?
Absolutely. We actually, because of our DEA registration and because of our diligence, we actually work with some other government bodies as well. We work with police agencies, we work with courts, we work with quite a few different government agencies to be able to accurately give them the quantification of hemp versus THC, of various things there, and absolutely.
Okay. Next question. What shipping companies are friendly towards shipping hemp internationally?
I know we've received packages from DHL before. That one, off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure. If whoever that is, if you'd like to email me, I'd absolutely be happy to do a little bit more research for you and get you an answer.
Okay, one more question still in the Q&A box. Can you discuss your glyphosate testing process, turnaround time, and any certifications?
Yeah, so we have a few clients who use us for the glyphosate-free testing and for their certification on it. Just like any of our other tests, it's on a 2 to 5 day turnaround time. I believe it is a $99 test, and it gets you your glyphosate as well as your paraquat and diquat testing. We can do it as stringent as we need to. I think we had a customer that needed us to go down to 25 parts per billion for it to be able to get their certification, and that was no problem at all for us. So we're happy to help with that.
Okay, excellent. Great discussion and great questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just a couple of other questions. Joseph, if you don't mind to change the panelist back to me real quick so I can add in the other poll, that would be great. We do want to know any hot topics you guys want to hear about for next week. So we'll be talking additionally about testing, and some of you guys had very specific questions that we want to drill in on again. And so we will update the poll on site so you guys can answer that. Before we do, in terms of the COA in progress, one person said they were an expert with 3%, 37% said they were skilled, 6% aware, 7% aware but have not read it before, and 5% were newbies. So that was great feedback. I'm sharing that on screen right now, I think. Can you guys see that on your screen? Perfect. Okay. And one more poll. Okay, question on screen right now is about future topics. So if you guys can please take a minute, you can select more than one, but we really want to hear from you all on the topics that are of most interest with regards to testing beyond compliance. And if there's something that is not on the list, please feel free to email us as well. In the meantime, while we're waiting for those results, we did have another question that came in. When do you think that leachability studies will be a norm?
And what do you mean by leachability studies?
I don't know. Let's see. For packaging.
Yeah, so that's actually something that's becoming a lot more commonplace, especially here in Florida now, is those shelf life and stability studies. That is another capability of ACS Laboratory. We have an accelerated degradation chamber. You can do up to a year, or you can do up to 3 years in it, but a year simulation in it is just 40 days in the chamber. So you can get those studies done to see, you know, if your cartridges are leaking heavy metals, if your bottling is leaking heavy metals, if your products are, you know, being properly maintained in their packaging, and we're more than happy to do that test. I think to answer about the consistency of them, I think they're starting to be more commonplace because I think we're starting to see more and more regulations that are requiring those shelf life and stability analysis as part of that compliance as well.
Excellent. Okay, so some of the things you hit on in your discussion are coming up in the survey results so far. In terms of the interest areas, with terpenes being one of the top areas of interest for next week. You kind of predicted that.
Yeah, that's a good topic though. We could talk about terpenes all day.
And shelf life and stability.
Awesome.
Okay. And let's see. We've had 15 vote. So if you guys are going to vote, please get those in so I can share the screen and make sure you guys see this as well. Okay, so a little clarification on the last question. Louise said she's talking about what's coming up with the plastic in beverages impacting the cannabinoid percent.
I haven't heard too much about that, but that's definitely something that a shelf life and stability test would be able to look at. You know, if something about the plastic or the container of that bottle is affecting those cannabinoid levels, the way we do our shelf life tests is at each testing interval, we'll test 3 samples for a full panel of tests. We'll then compare them to the day 0 results from that same sample. So if there is any change in those cannabinoid concentrations, you'd be able to see it. You could almost do 3 different bottles for the 3, or you do different stability tests in different bottles to be able to see if different bottles have a different impact on them, and that's definitely something that stability testing would be able to answer for you.
Okay, perfect. And on screen now, you guys should be able to see the results of the polling, which will tell you a little bit more about our webinar next week, Testing Beyond Compliance. Looks like we will be drilling deeper on terpenes, as discussed, shelf life and stability, and several of the other topics along the way, especially in terms of the specifics and R&D that we'll be looking at. So if there are no further questions, we will adjourn and again be sending out a link to the webinar survey inquiry, and we will see you next week. Don't forget to register on Eventbrite. Each webinar has a new Zoom link, so just want to make sure everyone has that as well. We will send out an alert from Eventbrite, so just stay tuned for that as well. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for joining.
Okay, thanks guys.